talk about what Donald Trump, because he is saying that he's going to get land back for Ukraine. What is Donald Trump misunderstanding about Russia and about this war?
First of all, it's very hard always to understand Donald Trump, what he means by any phrase, by land swaps or anything else. Everything is imprecise, varying by the hour and day. So I don't take the words literally. He doesn't mean them literally. What supposedly could be meant by this in terms of swaps is that Russia would get, quote unquote, all of two oblasts, Donetsk and Lugansk, the Donbas oblasts, and it would, quote, swap area that it has claimed in Zaporizhia and Kherson that it doesn't control right now. So that would be called a swap. It would say Kherson city or Zaporizhia city would remain Ukrainian, and Russia would stay in the parts of Kherson and Zaporizhia where its troops have reached the front lines, but not beyond that. That could be what's meant by a land swap. Honestly, until something is spelled out, trying to figure out what Donald Trump means is just not possible precisely.
Yeah, and Russia and Vladimir Putin's approach has been, as it always is, very diplomatic on the one hand, but there are rumors of Ukraine. Of course, we know that Ukraine is very much against any kind of settlement of this conflict at this time. And there's even rumors that they might try a kind of Kursk invasion in the Bryansk region. So given that the situation on the battlefield is still very much fluid, what do you make of the current state of the conflict and ultimately how the United States under the Trump administration has addressed it up until this point? Because it wasn't too long ago that there was just ultimatum after ultimatum to Russia.
Of course, I'm not a military authority. I'm a consumer of military news and information. My strong impression from very carefully monitoring what is said by a number of sources is that Russia is winning on the battlefield, that Ukraine does not have the personnel to proceed, and it also can't match Russia on many of the munitions and armaments. That makes perfect sense to me. It is clear that in a war of attrition, as this one essentially is, Russia's going to win this war. That, I think, was obvious from the start. So in this sense, Zelensky's refusal to negotiate does no favor to the Ukrainian people. It's not what the Ukrainian people actually want, as best we can tell. The most recent survey data that is being widely discussed shows that a significant majority of the Ukrainian people want the war to end with negotiations. Zelensky is a military dictator in essence right now. He rules basically without a vote. He is long past his term of office. I'm underwhelmed by Zelensky and have been from the very start. Of course, I have regarded him mostly as a puppet of a variety of forces, the extreme nationalist right of Ukraine on the one part, the United States for a long time. And when the United States started to say, we don't want to go on with this gambit of ours because it failed, then of the Europeans. No doubt Zelensky's in a tough fix, but he's putting his countrymen in an even far worse situation. This war should stop. There should be a settlement on the basis of neutrality, an end of this absolutely reckless U.S. adventure started in the 1990s of moving NATO to Ukraine and to Georgia, and some territorial losses because the United States and the Ukrainian post-2014 regime gambled, and they lost. They had many chances to avoid losing the Donbass. It was called the Minsk II agreements. But the United States and Ukraine said, no, we're not going to honor the Minsk II agreements. We're not going to give autonomy to the eastern regions of Ukraine, that is Lugansk and Donetsk. They gambled. I know that the American officials thought that they had the winning hand. I never think much of American strategists, by the way. They're failures. They're not very clever. They got this wrong, and I think predictably so. So this is a gamble that's failed. But Zelensky, for many reasons that are absolutely hard to weight appropriately or give a precise estimation, fights with the lives of his countrymen. It could be the mega corruption that is no doubt present in Ukraine. It could be his fear of the extreme right, that they would take him out if he made a compromise. A senior Ukrainian official said that to me many years ago. Well, Zelensky has no choice. If that's true, he should not have stayed in the job. For whatever reason, he's doing great damage to Ukraine and to the people of Ukraine. They're getting killed in huge numbers. They are losing on the battlefield. There was no way to win this war because either they, quote, would be winning it and then there would be an escalation, perhaps to nuclear war, or they would lose. There was no winning this war. This is a crazy U.S. gambit, as I said, going back to the 1990s to win a piece on the global chessboard. That's what Brzezinski said. That's what he wanted. That's what he wrote in Foreign Affairs in 1997 in the Geostrategy for Eurasia. That's what he explained in the Grand Chessboard. And it's been played out. And Brzezinski got it wrong, badly wrong. All the presidents played out this game. They kept thinking they could win their way or bluff their way to grabbing Ukraine for the U.S. side. And Russia was never going to let it happen. And it should never have been tried.
Professor Sachs, is there truly a way out? I want to know your kind of understanding and analysis, given your experience. You know, you sat with leaders, you've advised them. How would an actual statesman or a diplomat actually approach this issue? Because as you just laid out, the situation is bad. And the latest news leading up to renewed U.S.-Russia talks are not good for the Ukraine, U.S., NATO side. So how do they handle this? Because right now, despite the enthusiasm, there still is a lot of talk of kind of dictating terms to Russia, which doesn't appear to be very diplomatic in many respects. But how would a real statesman handle this?
It's a great question, Danny. And it's not an easy one to answer for a reason that will become clear. I wrote a book about one such episode, and that was the Cuban Missile Crisis and the aftermath in which the U.S. and the Soviet Union negotiated the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. And I wrote a book about John F. Kennedy's leadership from the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis through the successful negotiation and then Senate ratification of the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. And the essence of the story is that first, Kennedy understood that there was a win-win to peace, and there was a real risk of nuclear annihilation if Kennedy listened to the hardliners. Second, he understood, this is back in 1962 and 63, that Khrushchev, his Soviet counterpart, was in the same situation as he was, hearing from hardliners, but understanding it's too dangerous to go the hardline route. Well, Kennedy and Khrushchev found their way out of the Cuban Missile Crisis peacefully. Both sides withdrew short-range offensive nuclear weapons aimed at the other side, the Soviets from Cuba, the United States removing missiles from Turkey. The United States pledged never to invade Cuba again, a pledge that it maintained. And on that basis, the crisis was peacefully resolved. We know we came within a hair's breadth of nuclear war, actually, another long story. Even after the agreement was reached, a disabled nuclear submarine almost mistakenly and accidentally, in a way, triggered a nuclear war. So after those events, Kennedy and Khrushchev realized they had to do more than simply step back from the abyss. They had to pursue actual peaceful coexistence. And in 1963, they negotiated the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Now, what Kennedy did was, first of all, understand pragmatically what kind of deal could be reached. He understood that a deal could be reached that would be in the mutual interest of both parties, and he pragmatically negotiated that. He did something else absolutely remarkable, which is why I wrote the book, by the way. He made a public explanation of peace to the American people, even a peace campaign in the summer of 1963. He gave a famous speech on June 10, 1963, called the Peace Speech, which I encourage everyone to listen to. It's one of the most remarkable speeches of modern history. After that, he embarked for Europe. That's when he appeared at the Berlin Wall, when he spoke to the Irish Parliament and so forth. He bolstered his backing in those weeks by public appeal. Then he faced opposition to this deal from his own Joint Chiefs of Staff. And they testified in a very unpleasant way to the Senate that, well, this is all very dangerous. You can't trust the Soviets and so forth. And Kennedy went on a public tour in the United States explaining it's no miracle, nothing is sure in this world, but this is the best bet. In the end, the Senate overwhelmingly ratified the treaty. That's statesmanship. Tragically, there's an endnote or a coda to this. Kennedy was killed a few weeks after that. You know, for a long time in my life, knowing a lot about this, I didn't take a stand on what actually happened, but I'd say in the last 15 years of very extensive reading and files being released and even new files released in recent months, I'm pretty convinced the CIA took him out and took him out because of his peace initiative. And I think it is James Angleton who bears the most responsibility for this. And it is arguably true that every president since then has been a hostage to the CIA and to the American deep state, and that the lesson of statesmanship that I just explained, maybe it's no lesson. Maybe the lesson is keep your head down or you'll get knocked off. The truth is, and here's the point that I'm making, Trump probably, no one can guess, but probably would like this war to stop. He'd probably like to say that whole NATO thing, that was stupid. That was some failed gambit. He'd like to say this was Biden's war, even though, in fact, by the way, it was Obama's war, Trump's war, Biden's war, and Trump's war again. Yes. This is a deep state war. He knows that all of that would be subject to attack. He'd be called an appeaser. Munich, 1938. You know, you tell the truth in the United States and you're attacked by idiots like Lindsey Graham, or fools like Richard Blumenthal. I mean, these are just terribly ignorant people. Lindsey Graham, I call him the stupidest senator in the whole Senate. But in any event, yeah, he'd be attacked. He'd be attacked by Starmer because Britain is Russophobic to the core, always has been since 1840. Britain is even crazier than the United States because it has the same hegemonic aspirations and memories and nostalgia, I would say, and it's nothing right now in terms of global power, but it thinks it is one. So Starmer would jump up and down, and Merz would jump up and down, and Macron would jump up and down. And the job of the president would be, now this is the point, a statesman would not only make the deal, but he'd explain it. And you know what? If he explained to the American people, extending NATO was a gambit. It was against a promise that was explicitly made to Gorbachev and to Yeltsin back in 1990, 91, and 92. It was a bad idea. We knew it was dangerous all along. Our top diplomats told us that. George Kennan told us that. Jack Matlock told us that. Bill Burns told us that. All of them said the same thing. We knew it, but we thought we could get away with it because Russia was weak. Well, they played the poker hand. They bluffed. They raised the stakes. They lost. So now we're ending this particular game. If he explained that, the American people would stand up and cheer because this would be truth. It would make sense to them. He would explain clearly what he's doing, and he would win a battle against an idiot like Lindsey Graham. Not even close. But he doesn't do that. Why? Two reasons. One, maybe three reasons. One, he's incompetent. That's a pretty good guess. Kennedy was not incompetent. Kennedy was gifted and became even more gifted in the final year of his life. Second, he's afraid that he's politically cowardly. Or third, quite possibly, and it's part of the incompetence, perhaps he doesn't understand what real politics is. Real politics is not true social messages or threats to others. It's actually, in a country like the United States, it's actually engaging with the people. It is. It sounds naive, but it's true. If he wants to win this fight against Lindsey Graham and against Palantir and against the military-industrial complex and against the CIA, he has to take the case to the people. And if he did, he'd win. Subject to that last footnote that I mentioned earlier. Maybe he's just afraid. Maybe that's why it's so hard to make peace, because we are not really a democracy in the United States. We're not really a republic. We're really a military state dressed up with elections. But if the presidents don't have the guts to make peace, then what we are really is a garrison state. We're just what Dwight Eisenhower said we would be when Dwight Eisenhower gave his farewell message on January 17th, 1961. The military-industrial complex runs our country. That's the real issue here. Now, how much Trump understands, how much he doesn't understand, who knows? But if he wants to win this thing, he has to make an agreement with Putin, but he has to explain it to the American people, not prevaricate, not cut the corners, not make a threat like he always does to show what a tough guy he is, but explain this was an idea that really went sour, a typical U.S. CIA idea, a deep state idea. It goes back to the 1990s. It goes back to 1992, in fact, and it was the beginning implementation of it was 1994. So this is Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, Trump 1, Biden, and Trump 2. This is not any particular president. This is a long-term policy of the U.S. that has gone terribly awry.
And the Trump administration, as it finds itself very much mired still in the Ukraine conflict, it's also made moves. I know you've traveled to India recently. I know you've traveled to China recently. And while Trump is extending the tariff pause, or the, I guess, escalated tariff pause for another 90 days on China, he has caught a lot of flack for escalating secondary tariffs, as he's calling them, on India. And all of this revolves around the Ukraine conflict, at least in terms of how the Trump administration is outlining it. But there's this larger development happening in the world, Professor Sachs, that this Ukraine conflict falls under. Could you talk about the changing world and how this is influencing and maybe pressuring this military-industrial complex, this military state that runs the U.S. to keep chugging along in this lost war in Ukraine?
We are in the midst of one of the most profound changes of geopolitics in many centuries, actually, because I think it's right to say that starting in 1492 and 1498 with the voyages of Columbus and da Gama, and with the beginning of European ascendancy up to around 1700, and then from 1700 to around 2000 with the fact of European global dominance, a world in which the West was ascendant and then dominant for centuries has ended. It ended around the year 2000. China's remarkable economic success, made of very hard work and very smart economic policies, was the single most decisive element in ending the Western dominance. But the real story of ending the Western dominance was that after 2 world wars, Europe, in its exhaustion and its moral exhaustion, gave up, either relinquished or by defeat in war, its colonies all over the world. And with independence of these countries came at least the beginnings of economic development, and especially of mass literacy, the spread of science and technology. And China became the poster child of rapid economic development on this basis from 1980 onward. Now, all of that means that we're in a multipolar world now. China's a great power. The United States cannot defeat China. It couldn't even fight a war with China successfully in China's neighborhood, even though the U.S. seems to plan for one right now related to Taiwan. India is a great power by my calculation, not everybody's, but I believe it's already a great power. It's got a major economy. By purchasing power standards, it's the 3rd largest in the world. It's got a very sophisticated scientific and technological and professional class. It's a nuclear power and so forth. Russia is obviously a great power, whether the United States likes it or not. It's not the 3rd-rate power that Brzezinski envisions. It's the world's largest landmass, 17 million square kilometers, vast resource base, incredibly skilled technological workforce, and so forth, and a very strong military, 6,000 nuclear warheads. All of this means we're in a different kind of world from the world that the United States believed we would have at the end of the Soviet Union in December 1991. When the Soviet Union went down, which had been the aim of the American strategists during the Cold War, they said now it's a unipolar world. And in the unipolar world, the US dominates. There was a remaining task, which was to break Russia apart as well. Brzezinski opined that maybe Russia would become a loose confederation of 3 states, a European Russia, a Siberian Russia, and an East Asian Russia. Okay, these are the kind of fantasies and dreams of these strategists. But the idea was the U.S. was unipolar. Well, the U.S. is not the unipolar power. It's not the hegemon. It faces many other powers. The U.S. cannot impose its will. It can't impose its will on Russia. It cannot impose its will on China. It cannot impose its will on India. It can't impose its will on Brazil. So I've named 4 of the 5 original BRICS countries where Trump has gone after them in recent weeks to try to bring them to their knees. Lula, president of Brazil, put it most clearly. He said, "We don't need an emperor." Thank you. And Brazil is not caving. India is not caving. This extra 25% tariff on India is such a profound miscalculation of American foreign policy you can't even imagine. Within a few days, it has opened the eyes across India to the mythology that India was going to be the great partner of the U.S. against China. I always told them, it's stupid. Don't believe that.
I've seen you on Indian media, yes, say that same thing. Continue.
I was telling them for years, are you kidding? You think the U.S. is going to side with you and that you should join the Quad against China and so forth? This is ridiculous. I told them, make good relations with China. Then you're 40% of the world population. The two of you can make the multilateralism at the UN really work. You can make the new world order based on international law. Don't play the U.S. game. Well, in any event, they doubted me for a while. I think a lot of the Indian leaders, they like me, but they thought I was too sardonic about my own country. But Trump pulled it off. Within 48 hours, he convinced them entirely. President Modi's off to see President Xi Jinping. President Modi spoke with President Lula. President Modi is going to be hosting President Putin. It all happened within a few days because they understand what this is all about now.
Yeah. Yes, Professor Sachs, I know we are running short on time with you. Any final comments you have about this current moment before I let you go?
Well, let me just say, we don't know what's going to happen in Alaska, but we should hope that it is a pleasant meeting. We should understand that there's more at stake between the two countries than only Ukraine, although Ukraine's a big deal. There's the nuclear arms control. There is reestablishing normal diplomacy. There's actually the chance of reestablishing economic relations. So I'd say first that even if Ukraine isn't fully sorted out, there could be progress. I'm hoping for a pleasant, mutually respectful meeting. It would serve both countries well to have that. And if Trump has the gumption to tell the truth about Ukraine, that yes, it was a gambit gone wrong, we could actually see peace there as well. And Zelensky and Macron and Merz and Starmer, they probably understand that if Trump tells it straight, the war's over, whether they like it or not, and that there should then be a peace agreement, not just the chest thumping of the Europeans that will never agree to anything. If the United States and Russia rightly, not appeasement, but rightly agree to sensible terms to end what was a U.S. misadventure, then the others will have to come along, and that will be the right outcome.